I remember going into a casino one time and losing $110 on $5 blackjack and like literally being nauseous.
That
Over
happened.
many years, I'll lose that on a hand, and like
That happened to me in the Bahamas during my bachelor party. And I had one of like that nausea experience where I started on a $25 hand and I was told this foolproof way to win in blackjack. Obviously not
well,
foolproof.
you should have run the other way as soon as you heard that. There's no such thing
It's
as
anytime you lose a hand, you double your bet. And you just every time you lose a hand, you keep doubling your bet. And
you could do that if you have a bigger bankroll than the casino.
I got to a $3,000 hand and I decided that I did not feel comfortable losing any more money. So yeah, you can that works as long as you're willing to stay liquid.
That was terrible advice. You should have texted me.
What's up, everyone? I'm Alex Lieberman.
Yo, this is Jesse Pujji.
And this is The Crazy Ones. Mic's on, lights on, kind of seeing stars out of the corner of my eye right now. Another week in the life of builders. What's going on with you?
Well, I decided for the first time in Crazy One's history to not wear a turban to the episode.
That is true. That is breaking news.
Really,
right
the reason was I see how Sean Puri looks, and he's like the random Indian guy on My First Million, and you're the media guy, and I was like, man, I need to dress down more because he just looks so dressed down. I love you, Sean.
And so that's it. So
I was like the turban. I'm looking too fancy on these episodes.
Actually,
it's the end of the week, and I was like, I need to keep it casual. I've had a long.
I'm all for the casual look, though. It's funny. In the early days of the Brew, the second it got to like 60-degree weather, I would wear shorts in the office. And I remember one day Austin gave me so much shit about it. He's like, I can't remember what he said exactly, but basically he was like, you're setting a horrible example by wearing shorts to the office. And I was like, in my head, maybe I got a little defensive. I was like, but I don't give a shit if other people wear shorts to the office. What's your view on like employee garb?
Yeah, I think, well, let me start by saying like the reason I actually do take the time to properly put a turban on and make my beard look tidy, it's like a 45-minute process. And especially on something public, like one of the tenets of Sikhism, the religion, is actually to maintain the identity, almost like a uniform you don't take off, so that you are representing your people and, God and holiness and all that stuff. And so I do actually take it pretty seriously, especially in this kind of a venue. Like this is a show and it's going to be on YouTube and stuff. So it is interesting because I'm like, yeah, it's still tough to like be here. This is not, it's not representing, but it's not fully representing.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, do you feel bad doing this?
A little bit. I mean, yeah.
No, it makes sense because it's like it's an important part of your identity.
Well, and I also I know I'm representing a whole group of people. And so, to show up with kind of the bandana on, it's a bit of a thing. But this week, it's fine. It's I
was going to say, permission has been granted from everyone.
But no, I think in the workplace, look, I think like I'm like one of the big fans of these common sense things. I think it's interesting. What the more interesting category of how you dress in the office is one of the many things that aren't discussed about entrepreneurship, which is just like, you got to come up with a policy for how people show up to your office. We had issues with it for sure, where people were wearing like cut off midriffs and things. And we just had to we had to give some guidance. Right. And it's actually like a kind of a dicey topic, especially in San Francisco or other places that are uber liberal. And you say, guys, like, we have to have some reasonable type of attire. So shorts, I don't know, shorts don't bother me, but I think there's certain, I don't know.
Yeah. It's like, it's like, where do you draw the line? Totally.
Yeah, common sense. And I had a thread idea yesterday. I meant to write it down. I was playing tennis and I thought of this as like, are you ready to be a CEO, founder? That'd be the headline. And then it'd be like, that means, are you ready to blank? Are you ready to blank? Are you ready to blank? And not like raise money and generate a genius idea, but are you ready to have your first hire quit the day you need them the most? Are you ready to come up with policies for how people dress in your office? Are you ready to?
I like that. You have to write that thread.
Yeah, it's because I could write 100 things that most people, when they're starting a company or building a company, that's not where their brain goes, right?
100%.
Are you ready to come up with the policy for how dishes get cleaned in the office?
It just reminded me. It was probably 2018 or 2019, we're at like somewhere between 15 and 20 employees at this point, maybe a little bit more. And, you know, the early days of the Brew were all like the first few people on the team, you know, we were very, very homogeneous, like 22-year-old, like white male Jewish team. And then over time, the team got more diverse in every sense: gender, age, ethnicity, background. And I so vividly remember the first time that we hired a mom. We had never had a mom in the company. And then all of a sudden, you know, one day they asked us, because they had just had a child recently and they had to pump milk. Austin and I were like, holy shit. Like this is the definition of like when you
blind
are just
spots.
Yeah, when you have such a different life situation from other people, you have such blind spots to things you would never think about. So we literally, I remember at the time, our HR person literally had to like put up a curtain on one of our conference rooms, literally for them to be able to do that, because it just had, and there ends up being inevitably so many examples of that as you go about a business. And so it's almost like sometimes you just when you hire senior people, you're basically hiring people that are just uncovering those blind spots.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that comes up is like we've never talked about it actually. Like there's a lot of the DEI, like, you know, diversity, inclusion, equity, like thinking about, there's a lot of people out there. Some of my friends, like on a text chain, will be like, oh, like pronouns are so stupid. Why are they forcing everyone to use pronouns? Or, you know, don't force people to hire different people. And my response was like, you guys think that these businesses are stupid and they're doing this? Like they're caving to pressure? I'm like, no, it's good business. Like the fact that you didn't have someone like that meant there was probably a whole group of readers you guys didn't understand or appreciate.
100%.
Like, you know, like having women, having people of color, having tall people, short people, fat people, skinny people, like every type of person helps you actually build a better business.
Yeah.
Because the world is filled with all kinds of different sorts of people.
Yeah.
And so
unless Morning Brew's readership was like Temple B'nai Abraham in Livingston, New Jersey, like we probably needed a group that more like fully represented all the readers of the newsletter.
Yeah. And I think for founders, I noticed we had a thing. I remember we were a few years in also back in the day, and we looked around and like, there was like the male to female ratio was horrendous. There were no male, you know, leaders in the company. The 3 founders are obviously all men. And, you know, what I realized at that moment was like the ocean, you know, the waves of the current of like whatever will take everyone in a certain direction by default. And so if you don't actually swim against them a little bit, especially on DEI stuff, you will end up with something that looks like the default. And we made a bunch of changes. You know, the organization made tons of changes to change that. And not because, you know, there were some employees asking for it and stuff, but it was just much more like, wait, this is like, the funny thing about Ampush in particular was most of the people who click and buy e-commerce direct to consumer things are women, right? And so it almost made no sense. Like there was such a disconnect, and it was said differently. There was such a richness in making sure that the overall company's gender split was 50-50, that we had, you know, lots of leaders who were women. But it's an interesting one because it definitely comes up, and I think it's a lot of controversy, like the pronouns thing. My friends, there's people who just go like, oh, you're forcing it. It's so stupid. And the companies I'm in and around, I'm on the board of this one like old grocery store here in town, and like they take it all super seriously, and it has nothing to do with caving to pressure. They just believe it's a good business choice.
100%. Yeah. Well, I want to hear, you know, you mentioned like it's Friday, you're tired, you know, it's casual, crazy ones today, but I want to get some thoughts from you on what's going on in your world, but I want to just share, there's like 2 updates on the 2 businesses in Alex's startup studio right now. And so I just want to get your thoughts on them.
Let's do it.
So the first one is, it looks like we are going to be pivoting the Plunge. I would say it's 80% of the path to pivot, because basically, and this is where I think like being able to get comfort in the gray area as a founder is so important, because it's not like a test in school where it's wrong or right. Like there's never going to be someone who gives me a slip of paper that says this game is going to succeed or this game is going to fail. There's so much feel. But the TLDR is that as we've gotten more people to play this game, we have this ambassador program that I've set up. We have ambassadors who have the game, host weekly games in like 5 cities. There's been a common thread that we've heard, which is the game is too hard, that people have too much difficulty, that the first 10 times you throw the plunger, people will get it once or maybe twice. And it becomes, people like get unexcited about it. They feel dejected because they're like, this game's too hard. F that.
Right.
We heard this enough where basically I think we're in the place now where we want to go back to the drawing board, because I don't think the challenge of the game should be completion. I think the challenge should be competition and like improving your skill. And so I would say it's not an easy decision.
It's sort of like the opposite of pickleball, right? I think the reason pickleball is so popular is that anyone can pick up a racket and not only play it for the first time, but I've even noticed, my wife and I have played, like, I'm obviously a very competitive tennis player. Like when her and I play tennis, I have to bring myself down multiple levels. Yeah. And even then I could easily beat her, easily move her around the court. In pickleball, it evens us out quite a bit, even though, I'm good with a racket or whatever. And so it's
do you think you'll ever get bored of pickleball because of that easiness?
I don't think I'll ever be a serious I'm a serious tennis player and I love tennis and it's exercise, but I think I'm a awesome casual. Like I will jump in if people are playing it and obviously can hold my own. My wife and I played doubles against this other couple the other day and like, it was fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so like for me, I don't know. It's a good example of, I don't know if this is the right or wrong decision. Like there's a chance that we could still push forward with it and people buy it. And the difficulty is what some people love. But part of the reason
what's the pivot? What are you guys going to pivot to?
Is we're going to basically test out other suction based games, but that the barrier or like the floor for completion, being able to like do the activity like pickleball is way lower, so that people can play the game and then competition and getting more skillful is the long-term challenge. I also think there's something that I not that I want to change about myself, but I want to be cognizant about is I've said this before, but I love having original thoughts and original ideas and original businesses. And I think it's actually like a pretty I don't know. It's like a pretty false narcissistic view of oneself, because like Morning Brew wasn't original. This content agency I'm starting is not original. And so I just think we're trying to do too many things. I'm trying to teach people to enjoy throwing plungers while teaching people to play a suction-based game for the first time. What I'd rather do is like a remix where I take the rules of, say, cornhole or bocce, something where the behavior is proven, and bring it to a new form factor. But you're going to have people who are already interested in that behavior. And
can I challenge a little bit? Some of our listeners love it when we actually are like,
I actually want your feedback on all this.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the coaching episode we did. Like my story is, you are really excited about this idea. You brought it, you're pushing it into the world. You forgot, because I felt like this with Puforia and other weird things, like you forgot how damn hard this is and how much resistance building something into the world takes. You've had VCs chewing you out and saying you're an idiot, go spend your time on something bigger. You've had reactions and feedback, and it feels a little bit too much too fast. Like a couple specific pushbacks I have is, one is like, this is the same, people know what axe throwing is. Like you have done what you're saying already. Yeah. I don't know. It feels like too large of a reaction to something you haven't even given a fair shot in the world. Now, I think the feedback is very valuable. And I don't know, this what came up for me when you said that, or what I thought you were going to go was, I'm going to like innovate around the suction device. Like I'm just going to make it easier. Like, yes, okay, that's a very valuable insight in the iterative cycles, but I don't think it's abandon the whole thing. I think it's make the plunger easier to, maybe it's not a plunger, maybe it's a suction. So it's
funny. My partner for this business literally just sent me a text saying, I'm looking at it now. He basically was like, the designer at the factory in China iterated on the design and added a bunch of suction cups to it. Like little suction cups to the big one that makes it super sticky. Here, I'll show you the video.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And so that is an option. That is an option, is like, we made it stickier. That solves the problem. I'll also say two other things in my story of myself that I know are contributing to this. One is my fear of losing money. And my fear of I didn't realize how uncomfortable it would be to me to put a lot of money into a business before seeing any return from it.
Thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
like honestly, I feel so much more comfortable with this content agency right now. Not only because
time, so when Red Ventures invested in Ampush, and Rick Elias is like my mentor and a guy like I love and I respect a ton. And our biggest client at that time was Uber.
Mm-hmm.
And you may remember 2015, 2014, like they were losing $1 billion or $2 billion a year.
Yep.
And, we're meeting, going through the business, and Rick, like, he just takes a step back in his chair and he goes, man, if my company was losing $1 billion a year, I could not sleep at night. And at the time, I took it as a criticism of like the Valley and Uber for whatever reason. That's how it registered with me. And then as I've gotten back in starting things, I realized he wasn't criticizing. He was literally just saying, he was demonstrating like some self-awareness, going, I couldn't sleep at night. Like, I couldn't do that. And I've definitely had a similar experience burning cash with Kahani. And it sounds like you've had a similar experience even burning.
Yeah. Like, I didn't realize how uncomfortable the feeling was. Like, I've spent $36,000 on this game. My guess is to truly take it to market. If we're working with a Kickstarter agency, we run like their paid ad plan that they want to run with us. It's probably gonna be another $20K. That's $56,000. Haven't seen a dollar yet. Probably so far from taking profit out of the business. So. On the other hand, I have this content agency where I have a high degree of confidence that I can charge clients $6,000 to $10,000 per month and make a 50% margin on that. And I'm like, that feels really nice.
Yeah. And so lots of your unfair advantages are in that too. But exactly. But I don't know, dude. Let me give you one suggestion also that helped me a lot when I was feeling similar. And I think you're also doing it, the way you're funding the business is a little bit too piecemeal and haphazard. And it's like kind of a mind fuck for yourself, because every time you have to write the check, you have to revisit those emotions. I would encourage you to I know you have a lot of cash, like write $100,000 or $200,000 check, make your piece that it may disappear. And then go all in with that money and let your partner go all in with that money. And it is hard for guys who bootstrap, but it's also, dude, it's a limiting issue for both of us.
Totally.
I very much believe that, because there's people who could sleep at night losing $1 billion. And I'm not saying don't be who you are, but it's a good opportunity to challenge your growth in a way that, dude, that also, again, $200,000 you lost is not going to kill you. Just literally take your bank balance and deduct 200 from it and say, that's the number now. And I'm going to go do my best that I have with this plunge. Because I would hate to see you, either in large ways or small ways, throw the towel in on this, because I still believe what I've said to you every time, which is this going to be a $100 million business? I don't know. But do I think it could be a $10 million business that made $1 to $2 million a year? 100%. The market's big enough. There's enough people out there. And I think the suction thing, I don't know, maybe it's a sticky sheet on top of it. Maybe it's not even a plunger. Maybe it's like a faux axe that's safe, but will stick to something.
Totally.
There's an insight here that I don't think you should shift so fast.
I agree with that. So I'm meeting with my partner on Monday to talk through all of this, and I'll keep everyone updated. I do find, just to stay on that point for a second, around the discomfort of spending a shit ton of money. I do think part of it is just again, this fear of losing money mindset I've maybe had my whole life. I think the other part is it is very much the bootstrapper thing. And I think there's just there is this spectrum of what an entrepreneur's risk tolerance is. And it's always, entrepreneurs are bucketed in a certain way, but I really realized I hate losing money so much. And whereas we look at other founders, whether it's, Brett from Figure, who's putting so much of his capital into that business. And I'm like, oh my God, this person's conviction and their ability to be risk on. I could never do that in my life, but I have such and maybe it's because it's you want a little something that you don't have. I have so much respect for that. Mark Laurie, who founded Wonder, and he's building this utopia in Las Vegas. He took a bunch of his money from jet.com and diapers.com to fund these businesses. It's totally. It's a different
I think
mind.
Some of it is also just where you start and your tolerance. It's just like gambling, or I've never drank, but I guess what drinking is like. But for gambling, I remember going into a casino one time and losing $110 on $5 blackjack and like literally being nauseous.
That
Over
happened.
many years, I'll lose that on a hand, and like
That happened to me in the Bahamas during my bachelor party, and I had one of like that nausea experience where I started on a $25 hand, and I was told this foolproof way to win in blackjack. Obviously not
well,
foolproof.
you should have
but
run the other way as soon as you heard that. There's no such thing
it's
as
anytime you lose a hand, you double your bet. And you just every time you lose a hand, you keep doubling your bet. And
you could do that if you have a bigger bankroll in the casino.
I got to a $3,000 hand, and I decided that I did not feel comfortable losing any more money. So yeah, you can that works as long as you're willing to stay liquid.
That was terrible advice. You should have texted me. But
Yeah.
anyway, I think that there is a tolerance level, and I always think of it almost for myself even as like I'm building it up. Like I hope to be Brett one day, where I could just write a $10 million check into something and believe in it, or figure out how to grow it in that way. I've done versions. We've all done versions inside of an operating business. I'm sure you've launched initiatives inside of the Brew that cost $500,000 or $1 million and lost it.
It's not really your money, or it is, but it's in a derivative fashion.
Kind of. I don't know if you hadn't invested in that. Like, I mean, I like it's with Adrienne and I are working on a lot of stuff, and she sometimes struggles like even to ramp up hiring because she's even more hardcore in that direction.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, we'll track it. Like we are gonna invest in it because we could have taken that money out as a distribution if we didn't take it, but we're gonna instead pay people and hope to grow our own like. But the other thing to remember is inside of a company, oftentimes the returns on capital are way higher than even an investor ever gets. Like there's initiatives, hiring 5 salespeople can have a 500% return in a year if you do it well, right?
Totally.
But I don't know, dude. I think you should write a single check from here on forward. I think you should capitalize the company, and you should like let it do its thing, and know that trust yourself and trust that after if you run out with that money, just like you're done funding it, and then otherwise this piecemeal thing is going to drive you crazy.
Yeah, I can tell you that it already
and it's not. I think it's gonna. You're either gonna undershoot. Like some people do the opposite. They keep putting money in, and then they turn around. They spent $500,000 and they didn't realize it.
Yeah, that's my biggest fear. That's why I'm like so in my head about, because I'm like, if I'm not mentally proactive and anxious about it, I'm gonna get to that point, and if I'm at that point, I'll be sick.
Yeah, so I think be proactive in going. Here's a $250K check. The operator is also responsible for it. That's what we have to operate off of. We're going to win, lose, or draw based on our ability to do that well. It means we have to be nimble, fast, etc. And if we run out, obviously if we run out and the business is booming, but we just need cash flow, that's different. But if we run out and we haven't gotten traction in the business, then it's time to put a bullet in it and move on.
Totally. I will say the other thing, and you probably didn't experience this with Puforia or Envelope, because I would think those are products that have pretty damn good margins, but like a heavy outdoor game, like I've never had to deal with something that has true cogs to it. And so in my head, the fact that the margin you're working with from like square one is not that
different.
significant.
And it's all, again, but the reframe is like, it's a different business.
Yeah.
Like I was running services businesses, which also effectively have 100%, you obviously have the cost of your people, but and media businesses also have great cost structures. It's also funny because like I remember doing it, and like it's funny because you go on Twitter and the grass is always greener. Like everyone's like, I'm running a services business. I wish I was running a brand. I'm running a brand.
Yep,
I wish I was
100%.
running a SaaS business. And they all have their own unique challenges.
Yeah, you end up learning every business is hard.
Every business is hard in its own way, and multiples like getting $1 million SaaS ARR is probably as hard as getting $1 million in EBITDA, let's say in a services business. And guess what? Those streams are valued exactly the same.
Totally.
So like the market is very efficient in terms of how it treats these businesses and these business types.
Okay. So I just want to quickly throw at you what's going on with the content agency. I want advice on a few things, and then let's talk about you. So this content agency, I did a Crazy Ones like journal style episode on this, but the whole pitch is lots of founders, CEOs, execs like yourself who understand the value of building audience. They believe truly that they can drive business through their audience, but they don't have the time or skill to do it. So I'm hiring great ghostwriters to write on their behalf, and there'll be different packages. I'm charging somewhere between, depending on the package, $6,000 to $10,000 a month. And I look at the math of this and I'm like, I can get, I was like, my first goal is get this to $1 million of cash flow as soon as I can. And when I look at that, it's like, it doesn't seem like that crazy. Like, say it's a 50% margin business, means I need to do $2 million top line. $2 million top line is $170,000 a month. And if I charge a client $8,000, I need 40 clients. So I need 40 clients paying $8,000 a month to get this to be $1 million cash flow year business. And by the way, the big idea here is not the agency. The big idea is the people who I help build up their audiences. Can I launch businesses off the back of their audiences? So if I help someone in a niche build up their audience, can then we launch a different business together off the back of that? So that's like, it's like cash flow and then lottery tickets. I think the hardest thing for me, and see, like you have an advantage with this, with Growth Assistant, but like my biggest concern is scaling supply. I have zero concern about demand, zero concern. My concern is, how am I going to be able to scale enough great ghostwriters to get this to be a significant, like a great business? And I think there's like 3 answers. It's find supply that other people haven't found that's actually really high quality, unfound good supply. The second is train the supply. So train these ghostwriters, create a ghostwriting school that I also get paid for that become the ghostwriters. The third is leverage AI or automation to scale a ghostwriter from servicing 4 clients to 15 clients.
Right.
How would you, like, one, do you think, is that the challenge that you would think of when you're thinking about this business? And is, I guess, like, if you, knowing what you know, which is like right now, I have 3 clients. I onboarded the first one today. I'm onboarding the second one on Monday. What would you be entirely focused on right now?
Yeah, I think those 3 things you said, I mean, the answer is yes. You do all of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And who's the CEO of the business?
No CEO yet. That's another question I'm asking myself. It's like, when do I go and find the operator? Yesterday.
A month ago? Yeah. Well, I mean, like, unless you want to operate and run the business, I think it's important. Dude, it's like the hardest lesson I've learned from my journey so far. Because I also tried to shift gravity. And I just don't think there's a way you can microwave that. I think, like, something has to give, right? You either, like, for Rick, he kind of ran the business for a certain business line himself with the team for 5 years before then people started. He really created that culture. Then people started breaking off, and he can kind of run it with like GMs.
Yep.
You know, Buffett buys the business. Like, there's all these examples, but nobody can get away from, you need amazing leadership, and you need to be a coach of leaders, in my opinion. Right.
Yeah.
So that's probably the number one thing I'd be focused on, is bringing in someone to be your partner and to run it with you. So that's number one. I think number two.
And by the way, sorry, just on that, I think if you were to ask me why haven't I done that yet, I think it's a very easy, obvious answer, which is because the idea of potentially paying someone a $150,000 a year salary before the agency is cash flowing enough money to pay for that is scary to me.
Yeah. One of the, you know, type 7 Enneagram. Did I send you the thing that was like news, the acronym news?
No.
So like the biggest fear type 7s have, or like the biggest anti-pattern or whatever that we try to avoid, is being nerdy, empty, stingy, and withdrawn. They're like our 4 anti-patterns to be managed. And it's funny because I feel the stinginess that you're talking about too. And I'm a little bit more like when I bought this exotic car right after the Ampush deal closed. And I remember the week before I was like, and this has happened to me with big purchases. I'm like, oh gosh, like this is, what am I doing? Like, I have this now, what if it goes away? And like, I feel tons of scarcity. And I had a moment of like clarity. It's like why meditation is good, because I had the real me came out, and I was like, no, this is why I did, like, I want these, like, this is a fun thing for me. I don't need it. Like, but like, this will be fun. And I literally executed the purchase. I think from the time I test drove it till the time I bought it was less than 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
And I did it because, dude, I like part of the reason I want you to do this $250,000 check, and I want you to lose
the discomfort,
is because you're going to get past and go, oh, wait, I still have probably more than I know what to do with. And that's how I feel, in a very gratitude, way, which is, it's fine. Like, and I think that scarcity thing is it's a real challenge.
Oh yeah, no, it holds you back for sure. 100%.
Well, and one way I've designed it that could be helpful for you is, like, I've done a thing, with some of the partners where they get the first cash out.
Yep.
Because you don't, at least you don't need cash. I know you don't need cash, right?
Yep.
So you don't need the cash from the business. So I've done a thing where, hey, you'll get the first 150K out and you get a chunk of the business. It's obvious why they need you. Both, like, there's at least two reasons. One is you're going to bring the supply and the demand, and you're going to bring the expertise and the knowledge.
Yep.
Which, like, the right person, if they can replicate those things, they shouldn't work with you. But the person who would be the right person would know that those things are valuable, and learn from you would be the third bucket, right? Like, learn from your experience. So that's where I would focus myself. And then, yeah, I think, like, in terms of if your question is how do I run a good services business, I would say you don't need more clients yet. Like, the CEO should be able to handle the 3 you have with your strategic input and spending some time and creating the playbook, if you will, because you're the content creator, or you're the guy writing the how for this, how this works. And then that person absorbs it, and then say they get to 5 clients. They get to some number where it's like, ooh, that's a lot, like, and the business should be profitable because of the math. And you go, okay, now let's hire one person or maybe 2 people. Let's, like, in-house one copywriter and one kind of account manager type. And the goal there, it's going to take 3 to 6 months, is that person you hire should be able to take on basically the load of those 5 customers, and the experience improves for the customers.
Yep.
They go, this is better than when the CEO was here. This person's more on top of it. They're more responsive. The output quality, the output's better. Once you can accomplish that, it's like a McDonald's franchise. We used to say this at Ambush in the early days a bunch. Wake our little McDonald's. Like, once we have a McDonald's, right? That's all it is. Then you go, okay, well, I know how to scale. Okay, you need this type of person to hire. This is the trainings that they needed. This was the way they used this playbook. That they had 2 copywriters per team. This is the Notion templates or whatever. But I think a lot of people spend way too much time as the operator running. The CEO has to get out of it, other than maybe, you and the CEO have to be out of the delivery of the service.
Yep.
Other than maybe coming in, whatever you're willing to do, once a week, once a month, with, like, I'll review stuff and give specific comments. And when you do that, it all gets up leveled into the organization.
Yeah.
Like, Rick taught me this, and I started doing it. It's like every time I would meet with teams, we just open sourced it in the whole company. Like, the entire company would sit down and hear me and John and some of the other people responding to. I think this is like, imagine you looked at a thread and gave feedback in front of a bunch of people.
Totally.
They immediately absorb it, and then it's like, okay, then next time it just keeps leveling up and leveling up. So you really have to think about that McDonald's franchise, and then that's how it scales. It scales via the quality of hiring the right people, training the right people, and leveraging stuff like AI and tools. They all go together. And so
would you hire the copywriters full time or have them as freelancers?
I think I'd have both.
Yeah.
I'd have a couple in-house people, and I'd have a network of people who know your style. Like, even that, like, we would have, they're not just copywriters. They're, I don't know what the name of the company is, but they're Lieberman trained. Huh?
No name yet.
Okay. They're Lieberman trained.
We'll come up with a name on the show. I will.
By the way, there's a book called Managing the Professional Services Firm.
Okay.
Which you and whoever the CEO should read. It's as dry as it sounds, like as the title sounds, but it's literally one of the beacons of, like, knowledge that, like, it gives you the entire P&L model. It tells you, like, how to focus on training versus hiring.
David Meister.
Yeah, it's like, looks boring. The title's boring.
Oh my God, it's like the world's worst cover. Okay, I want to get a quick download on what's going on with you, but first, quick break to hear from our partners. Crypto conversations are too often about who's up and who's down and all of the drama on Twitter. But most conversations about crypto miss how it's going to change everything, which is why I recommend listening to the brand new podcast Validated from the Solana Foundation. Each week on Validated, host Austin Federa pushes aside hype cycles and financial advice to bring you conversations about the biggest ideas shaping the internet. Look, when it comes to blockchain, the thing people talk about most, the price, is actually the least interesting part, which is why Validated stands out, because it explores the philosophical and technological questions about cryptocurrency, NFTs, DeFi, and beyond, all while sharing stellar perspectives from some of the world's leading Web3 journalists, analysts, and experts. So whether you're a technology enthusiast just beginning your crypto journey or already active in Web3, don't miss out. Follow Validated on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and let them know I sent you. Let's hear it for the little wins, like holding a yoga pose for a few seconds longer than last time and realizing your own strength. This summer, Think wants to help you accomplish even more by fueling your mind and body. Think is helping you transform positive thoughts into positive action. Boost your mental and emotional strength by joining their Stronger Than You Think series on Instagram and TikTok. Connect with other like-minded people through virtual yoga, guided meditation, and daily mindfulness practices, and treat yourself to thoughtful nutrition with Think's high-protein bars. Follow the Stronger Than You Think series for your chance to be featured on Think's social channels. You could even win samples of new Think bar flavors, high-protein brownie crunch, and keto chocolate peanut butter pie. Get started at strongerthanyouthink.info/thecrazyones. That's strongerthanyouthink.info/thecrazyones. Okay, we are back. We talked a little bit about the potential plunge pivot and existential crisis I'm going through with spending more money in life, and Jesse basically telling me to suck it up and deal a little bit with kind of exposure therapy as it relates to spending on things. And then we went into the agency, and actually, honestly, Jesse's like the perfect person to give me thoughts and feedbacks on me scaling this Twitter and LinkedIn agency. And we are going to come up with a name for it in the future. But if you have an idea for a name of my unnamed content agency that now has 3 clients, please let me know. Shoot us an email at thecrazyones@morningbrew.com. But before we finish up for today, I want to talk about what's going on in your world, Jesse. What's up?
Man, there's a lot going on, which we can talk about probably in detail at a future time. I think what I would say is like the process of entrepreneurship. It's like one of the reasons I love it is because it's such a growth dojo. It challenges you in every way. Like there's just not a way it doesn't challenge you. And I think one of the kind of experiences I've been dealing with in the last few weeks is just really sort of this mix between when do you sacrifice versus when are you true to yourself. And I think it's not often like it's not probably something that I'm sure every entrepreneur listening is nodding wildly, but most people who are not entrepreneurs don't understand it, that like pretty quickly, this could go into my thread, like, are you ready to be a CEO? Are you ready to have the expectations of employees, investors, customers, partners? You really absorb those on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. And I know for many, many years at Ampush, that was like the only reason I was continuing to run the company. And it took me multiple years to like unwind that from myself. And so, yeah, I think that's like, just debating that in my head and going like, well, to what extent am I being true to myself in certain ways? To what extent am I doing things because of the expectations of others? It's a challenge every human deals with, by the way. I think it's a little bit more, well, I don't know. Actually, I guess this is the only thing I've ever done. But in my experience, it can be very intense as an entrepreneur. And not wanting to let people down and not wanting to, and especially for me, I think I hold a lot for being a great people leader and employees. And so I think when you disappoint people, like when you make a business change or a shift, it can be a really hard thing to do.
Totally. And I feel like also, I feel like such a big question there also about how much do you like sacrifice versus do the things that, you're being true to yourself on. Is I've always asked myself this question of like, is it possible for me, like in some ways, I think I can be a better entrepreneur today than I was 8 years ago because I have more tools, knowledge, network, etc., more resources around me. But on the other hand, I'm like, I'm never going to like, it's going to be very hard for me to be as motivated to climb through shit and do things I don't want to do again. Like the stuff we were just talking about with the plunge of like, a little bit of adversity to the business. I'm already thinking about the pivot. Like probably for Morning Brew, I can't remember what my thoughts were, but like that was like
put your head down and jam through and said,
exactly. So like, it's interesting, for us as we're kind of moving on to our second, third, fourth at bats, what is the right proportion while not quote unquote being like too comfortable in kind of the seats we sit in now.
Yeah, that's it. I was talking to my coach yesterday, and he interestingly was sort of like, you know what, Jesse, like the head, by the way, type 7 is a head type, right? There's 3 types. There's a heart type and there's a gut type of the 9 Enneagram types. And our type is a head type.
And what does that mean?
Head is like thinking, like it processes it through information, data. Heart is like literally like my wife is like this, is like, what is she feeling? What's her, what's her intuition picking up? Like she's not even consciously reading body language and tone of voice and all these other things that I like probably too, basic to pick up on. And gut is like, what do you want? what's wanting. Like it's almost like what's pulling you.
Hmm.
And one of the things I've been working on is like learning how to actually like listen to heart and gut. And so a lot of my reflections with him have been like, just like literally pay attention to the physical aspects of your body as a way to figure out whether or not like, are you really doing this because this is what you want to do, this is what you think the right path is, or are you like, are like, to what extent are you bending or shifting, you know, your being and how you want to be because you think it's the right thing to do, or because you're trying to follow a certain path, right? And it's funny, I understood this in a much more basic way many years ago. Like people would ask me coming, you know, I went to Penn, I went to Wharton, there's a lot of successful people out of there, and they'd go like, who's the most successful? And every kid there is a little insecure and, you know, whatever. And I'd say, you know, it's funny, the most successful of my friends, this is when I was like 30, let's say, they're the ones who just knew what they wanted and they just committed to it. And the like funny answer, I was like, were they consultants? Were they bankers? Were they hedge fund guys? I'm like, all of the above, yes. It just like the guys who became entrepreneurs, like, you know, Nat Turner's a really successful buddy of an entrepreneur. Like he just knew. He knew from the minute, and he not just did he know, but he was willing to commit to it in a way that a lot of kids who go there are not. But same thing with like my hedge fund rich friends. Those guys loved investing. They never went off of it. They always stayed true to what they knew and what they wanted. And so, you know, I think there's just something, I think tuning into knowing when you're doing what you want. I guess maybe to answer your question, I think the balance is self-awareness and being willing to say like, oh no, this is not what I want. And maybe at certain times you will say, okay, for a few months, I'll try it this way to see what I think of it. But ultimately you're able to kind of like, you don't get stuck.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, the awareness piece is huge because I mean, I'm going to record a Founders Journal episode on basically zone of genius and energy audit, because those are chapters from Matt Mochari's book. Like you've talked about zone of genius a lot, and the exercise I did yesterday that I found to be really helpful, and I don't know if you've done this a bunch of times in the past, is like the energy audit, which is like I went through my calendar the last 2 weeks and I color coded red or green. Green were things that gave me energy. Red were things that took away energy from me. It was also a really good litmus check for, is what I believe my zone of genius to be actually what is shown by my calendar of the things that give me energy and don't.
Right.
But like, yeah, like I think I didn't even have awareness of the things that I necessarily didn't like. For example, like I do this 60-second startup series we've talked about in the past. I had 5 hours of recording them last week, and they were completely energy sucking. And they were energy sucking because like I love creating content, but it's not my creative side because I'm asking the same freaking 13 questions every time. I'm like, why couldn't I just play a recording of me and they record their answers to it? Which honestly, I think I should do. And so, yeah, I think to your point, like it's before
just
you
have them answer the questions and you just
that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. But so to that point, it's like, yes, like you're going through in your head the decision of how much am I willing to sacrifice versus do what I know to be true to me for how long. But even before that, you need to know what is true to you.
What is true to you, totally.
Yeah. And so like that, I think I'm going to do the Founders Journal about this, but like we should talk about that in
the
upcoming
zone of
episodes.
genius exercise is great. I think the other thing I'd add quickly is knowing it's not just zone of genius, but it's also understanding your context for things. Like you could do 60-second startup from probably an excited place or your entrepreneurial mind gets engaged, and you can do it from a like chore place. Yep. And that's kind of true for anything. And so like that's also starting to figure out how are you relating to the thing you're doing in that moment. You can like Adrienne and I talk about it for Growth Assistant a lot, where when she relates to it as helping the people, especially the folks in the Philippines, she wants to grow the business forever and to be huge because she thinks she's really helping and she wants to help people. When she thinks about the P&L, it's super undermotivating for her.
It's basically, you're saying like finding a way to like channel the right motivation before you do the thing. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Okay, let's finish up with a quick AMA from a listener. We had a bunch of questions sent in from Crazy Ones listeners and viewers. And if you do have any questions for Jesse and I, and you want us to possibly answer one on an upcoming episode, shoot us an email at thecrazyones@morningbrew.com. But today's question comes from Aaron P. And Aaron asks, I've noticed my boss doesn't take feedback well. What do you do to navigate it? Especially if the feedback is important and crucial to the business. How do I create more psychological safety when delivering tough information to my boss? What do you say?
I was just like imagining being like, "Hey, boss, you don't take feedback well," and he's like, "Yes, I do. I love feedback. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, totally.
It's a tough one, I think, I will say in defense of founders everywhere, it's hard for someone who works for a founder to fully appreciate the amount of things going through their mind and the amount of things on their plate at any given time. So I will say that like it's just one thing to create a little bit of empathy for founders. Is just like no one, like I've had a lot of people who, even when I was like, I would argue not a great leader, who left Ampush and eventually started their own companies. And every single one of them would call me one day and go,
Yep, totally.
"Wow, Jesse, I would have behaved differently. I would have tried to be more helpful. I just didn't get it. I did not understand what your plate was like." So with that said, I think the best suggestion I'd have is like, I think you maybe ask the person to go to dinner, get them out of their matrix. Even before you start jumping to give feedback and stuff, like there's a little bit of like, hey, is now a good time? Hey, could we schedule time so I could give you some feedback? Would you be okay with that? And actually like let the founder get to the place where they're ready to listen and ready to hear it. Most founders do want to learn and get better. Not all, obviously, but one thing I would just try is like try to also consider for a second that founder doesn't know how to create safe space for themselves. How about that? Right? Yeah. They have no idea how to actually even not judge and criticize themselves, much less anybody else. And so they may even need help going, can I give you can we spend 15 minutes? Would you be open to feedback? And then say, would you be open to like listening and just kind of hearing me out? And then if they say no, or like you're not scheduling time, then that's one thing. If they say yes, then try to give it to them at that moment.
I also find like being very upfront about your emotions in that moment can be a very a easier way to broach that conversation. If in that moment you're like, I want to be totally upfront with you. This is really nerve-wracking for me right now. Like I'm a little bit scared in this conversation, but I feel like it's really important to have, and so I'm just going to say it, and we'll see where that leaves us. I think that's one.
I'd ask before even saying that though, like, and I'd say blah blah blah, and I'd say like, so can I have it? Is now a good time? Oh no, and it's not. Totally. Okay, you're super busy. You got 10. Okay, can we schedule a time? Can we go grab dinner sometime? Could we go for a walk around the block?
I also think it's kind of like in some ways the reverse of radical candor from Kim Scott, which like I generally view that as you as a manager, what's the best way to land feedback with your employee? But I think it works in the reverse where it's like if you as the employee not only can be open and honest with your manager, but also they know you care deeply about them and more importantly, the company doing well. Like if you believe they truly believe that to their core, I think it gives you more permission to speak more directly when they're like so-and-so employee, They want to see me win and they want to see the company win.
Yeah. So I think it makes good sense. It's not easy. I mean, I think feedback is one of the hardest things for sure.
And creating psychological safety when it doesn't exist. That is a really difficult thing. Okay, this was a fun conversation as always. Thank you, Crazy Ones, for listening to the episode. As mentioned, shoot us an email at thecrazyones@morningbrew.com. Introduce yourself. We want to chat with many of you. And we will talk to you all next week. Later, everyone. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of The Crazy Ones. If you're an entrepreneur or a builder and want more great startup content, make sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts.